Why are women and girls pathologized for being angry about abuse and for normal and natural reactions to their experiences and trauma? Those are the questions at the heart of a new book from Dr. Jessica Taylor, the psychologist and campaigner who is founder and director of Victim Focus. Sexy but Psycho: How the Patriarchy Uses Women's Trauma Against Them is out now. Dr. Jessica Taylor, welcome to the programme.
Thank you for talking to me about it.
No, thanks very much for being with us. Look, you write about the history of these themes as well, but this book is mainly about modern society. Tell us about your belief that women and girls are pathologized for their responses to abuse and trauma. What are the mechanisms through this occurs, and how widespread is it?
Wow, what a huge question. Okay, so we have developed in the last, as you say, it goes into quite extensive history, but if we talked about in the last 100 years, our psychiatry, psychology, and mental health movement has always been inherently misogynistic. There has always been, the focus on women as problematic, as hysterical, as mentally ill, as in need of control. And, so treatments included mass womb extractions, ECT, so electroconvulsive therapy, but treatments also included things like getting married to a man or being forced to get pregnant and have a baby, because if you were seen as not behaving as a correct woman, nice, docile, polite, submissive, sexually available, then you are much more likely to be sent to an asylum. And so if you look at that in our modern day, where we are right now, women and girls are still much more likely, 7 times more likely, to be diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and EUPD, which is emotionally unstable personality disorder. You're much more likely to have several psychiatric diagnoses at once if you're female, whereas males often only get diagnosed with one. And the latest NHS data, which I've included in this book, and I was kind of, hoping that people would pay attention to it, is that the NHS are reporting their own data in their own mental health wards as saying that the biggest recipient group of forced chemical tranquilizers are girls under the age of 18 in the UK. So this is, for me, I don't feel like that much has changed. I feel like we're getting more palatable, more professional. There's definitely been a professionalization of mental health and psychiatry, but I don't particularly think that we've made any progress in 100 years at all.
You write that psychiatry is the patriarchy with a prescription pad and a pen full of ink. You presumably don't think that always offering advice or like mental health counselling and advice and psychiatry indeed to women who've suffered abuse or trauma, it's not always motivated by something other than trying to help them, right? We're talking about on a systemic level
Yeah.
rather than an individual level.
I agree. I think it does happen on an individual level, but
Right.
but my argument is systemic because I focus on systems of oppression, not on individuals. So for example, in the book, I've interviewed psychiatrists that also agree with what I'm saying, that, these are psychiatrists working in the NHS right now saying, I am expected to see as many women as possible per day, assess, diagnose, give them a prescription, get them out of the door. And, that's very similar to what GPs in the NHS have been telling us about general medicine. So psychiatrists are now saying, well, that's what we're expected to do. And if we don't diagnose them, we're seen as we're not doing our job. So, I was talking to one psychiatrist who said that all she ever really wants to do is sit and talk to those women about what they've actually been put through, whether that's loss or neglect or abuse or, anything really that they could have been put through, but they're not able to do that. They have these very short appointments. They're supposed to follow a framework, assess them against the diagnostic criteria, diagnose them with a mental disorder, get them out the door with a prescription.
Yeah, sure. Look, you write in the book about your own experiences, which were horrific, and you write about the baffling and concerning police decisions which allowed your alleged abuser to not be prosecuted, and how straight away you yourself were then encouraged into professional mental health settings, almost as an alternative for the job being done properly by law enforcement. Tell us about that and your reaction to that at the time.
So I was only a teenager. I think I must have just turned 19, or I might have been 18. And I was waiting. I'd been waiting 14 months for my trial date, and I'd been told, we're going to court, it's going to court. The man had been charged with 13 offences. I was told that the trial would be at Christmas. And, it's very much what everybody else goes through, to be honest with you. You get long periods of time with no updates. Nobody really tells you anything. You don't really know what's going on. You try and ring them. You don't really get much of a response. So it's very similar in that way. And then one day they turned up at the house, and I thought, this is the day. This is the day I'm going to be told that we're going to court, because I've been waiting 14 months for the court date. And instead they came and said, We've gone outside of our charging period. We've decided to drop all charges and release him from bail. But also, you know, he seems a good guy, keeps coming to the bail meetings every month. He seems nice. And, you know, the thing is, we're beginning to think that it's you that's mentally ill and that you're a waste of police time. And, you know, you on my records, which I got much later, sorry, 1 second. Sorry about that. So yeah, I much later got hold of my police records, and the officer in my case had actually said that I was a telltale. That's what's on my police records, that I, as a teenager, that I'm a telltale because I reported rape and abuse. So they gave me this leaflet. And I, you know, again, I'm only quite young when I got this leaflet. Obviously, I'm not a psychologist like I am now. And they sort of said, you know, I think you would benefit from getting a diagnosis and medication. You're very obsessed with this child. You keep ringing us for updates. And even at that age, I remember just looking at him thinking, what? Like, how is that some sort of criteria for an illness? That, like, of course I kept ringing you for an update because you weren't telling me where the trial was, and I was a teenager and I was scared. I'd had to move 50 miles away from where I lived. I was on my own. Like, you know, it was scary. So yeah, like, the thing is about that is that I didn't recognize that at the time as pathologization, because why would I was a teenager? It's only through years of professional practice that I'm seeing the same thing happen to women from all different backgrounds, even even girls as young as 10 or 11 years old. And that was when I started to think, hang on a minute, this isn't a one-off, this is a pattern.
Yeah, a systematic pattern of basically telling. Well, so we're talking about telling women who are presenting the patriarchy with some kind of problem that the problem is theirs because they are mentally ill. Is fundamentally what you're talking about here.
Yeah, pretty much. And I think that we socially have done a good job of that, and I don't mean that in a positive way. I mean that it's been a successful campaign. So, you know, women, even, I don't know, even feminist protesters are often repositioned as mentally ill, delusional, disordered, hysterical, psychotic. And so there's also that element as well, isn't there, in the book, where yes, we've got women being repositioned as mentally ill, as a slur, as an insult. And I find that really interesting, because we've had these shiny national campaigns, you know, end mental health stigma, mental health is for everybody, mental health's the same as physical health. Then why are you able to use it against people? If it's the same and it's not stigmatized and it's not a slur, how can you call it somebody as a name? How can you know, you can't say to somebody like, oh, well, you're diabetic. Well, because that would be the equivalent, wouldn't it? If it's the same, if it's mental health is the same as physical health, we would use, you know, things like, oh, well, what do you know? You've got high blood pressure.
I remember a few years ago interviewing a series of female MPs about the extent to which female MPs are just routinely called mad in the media when they are when they are causing, and you know, I mean, and they might be doing things that they can legitimately be criticised for, but that is the way the criticism always pans out, which is never quite the case with men. Look, you write about how women and girls with a mental health diagnosis on their medical records who present with other health issues are often told that it's actually down to their mental health and not another issue. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and I think this is something that is, the evidence base for this is growing. I'm really lucky that thousands of women and girls talk to me because of the platform that I have. But in terms of that experience, and also through talking to professionals that work in those sectors, I have a real concern that because your psychiatric diagnosis, mental health issue, whatever it is you want to call it, has been put on your file, there are systems that exist in the UK, the US, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, that will flag that as somebody clicks into your file as a warning notice or as an advisory notice. And in some cases, I spoke to professionals where the actual thing that flags up on the screen says warning, like the word warning with an exclamation mark, and it'll say bipolar or borderline personality disorder or something like that. And in some cases it doesn't, it comes up as an advisory notice, but still my concern around that is, what does that do psychologically to that professional? So they've gone into your file, you're sat there and saying, oh, I found a lump, really worried about it, I don't know what it is. And then they go, oh, okay, click into your file and go, oh, it says warning, you know, you've got a mental health issue. Again, that leads me back to the question about stigma. Why is that required? And how could that then be used against you? And I hear from women and girls all the time that will say to me, you know, I have a a diagnosis of bipolar on my file, and after I had a baby, my hormones went weird. I got very ill. My periods went all over the place, and they kept just telling me it's the bipolar. It's in your head. Go back to your mental health nurse. And what I guess worries me about that is that there's other evidence coming out from other parts of medical research, which is suggesting things like, you're much more likely as a woman to have your cancer picked up at stage 3 and 4. You're much more likely to go to the doctors 10 to 15 times about endometriosis and told it's in your head, it's stress. You're like half of women with an autoimmune condition will be told they have a psychiatric disorder first, and then later be found to have, Hashimoto's, thyroid issues, arthritis, and things. So how much of our medicine is being influenced by this belief that women just are a bit emotional and exaggerate their symptoms?
Well, look.